And welcome in. It's Monday, February 3rd. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology podcast. Thanks for tuning in again for another week of fun and frolic as we get ready for Mercury retrograde. That's not coming up until next week, but we'll talk about the shadow period. One other thing in the news, I guess, sort of, is that in the United States, at least, there is a non-New England Patriot Super Bowl champ. Congratulations, Kansas City. Well done. All right, let's talk about this chart. So a couple of things. I wanted to do this first. Are we in a phase of energy right now? You know, this whole Saturn-Pluto, this whole dynamic is something that is not a big crescendo. It's not a big one-time event. It's a series of things happening over time. So let's just reflect on for a minute on some of the things that have been happening. I mean, first of all, like what happened last fall, tripped the domino on the impeachment of Donald Trump, which looks like will get wrapped up this week. Prince Harry and Meghan left the monarchy recently, and Britain left the EU. Did you see that video floating around on the internet of the young lady and the man walking into the Hall of Flags and taking Britain's flag out? I mean, that is a huge mental image. Kobe Bryant and his daughter killed tragically last Sunday in a helicopter. The breakout of a pandemic that we haven't seen for about 20 years. The SARS virus, I think, was the last one in around 2002 or 3. As a result, the U.S. stock markets fell about 1,000 points last week. Helicopters and other things kicked the fires up in Australia again. And there was a massive 7.8 earthquake in the region around Costa Rica and Jamaica. And you know, I say this so much here, the macro and the micro. Let us not disrespect what's going on in the macro. And still, in our own lives, there are so many things that are taking place as we see anything from revelations, inspirations, on the other side of the spectrum, to injuries, marriages being challenged, and some souls deciding to just check out early. Here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Majana today is going to be going to a funeral service this afternoon of a young man who she worked with when she was the directing the youth at Unity of Dallas, who just didn't wake up one morning, 18 years old, no explanation, and a very tight, large family that has been shaken to the core. Now, let's talk about Mercury retrograde because that conversation is starting to amp up. It goes retrograde on the 16th, so that's not until the middle of next week. But it did move into Pisces today, so we have Mercury in Pisces, and it has entered its shadow period, which is when it starts to slow down to get ready to go backwards. That's backwards on the chart. It really doesn't do that, but we'll talk about more about the Mercury retrograde dynamic when we get closer to it. But anyway, between now and next on the 16th, so that's Sunday 2 weeks from now. So it goes through 2 weeks of shadow, progressively slowing down, and it will get up to, let's see, checking my chart here, 12 degrees 52 minutes before it turns retrograde, 12 degrees into Pisces. Now, the moon is in Gemini, so the moon moved into Gemini overnight and is still in a wide trine, just barely. I mean, if you're catching this early this morning and you wanted to do some meditating around some of that Saturn-Pluto trine, the moon, you still got just a little bit of time. And yeah, boy, was that powerful over the weekend. What we talked about on the weekend podcast was there if you caught it. But there's another little subtle aspect that is worth mentioning for today, and that is that Saturn and Pluto, which are sitting at 23 and 25 degrees Capricorn, Saturn at 25, Pluto at 23, is sextile to Neptune and Venus. Okay, so we've been talking about the moon being this trigger of various things as it transits both sides of Saturn-Pluto. And what do I mean by both sides? Well, as I'm looking at the chart for today, and I advance it up to mid-morning, it's I'm looking at 7:30, 8:30 Eastern Time. Saturn and Pluto are basically over at the 9 o'clock position on the clock, and the moon is in Gemini, which would be down at about the 4 or 5 o'clock position on the clock face. So in other words, it's on the bottom half of the chart, or what we would call the nighttime part of the chart. And it's rotating over there. When it gets into Cancer, it opposes Saturn, Pluto, and then it moves across the daytime part, or the upper part of the chart. And as it crosses the nighttime part, which it's doing now, when it gets into Aries, it throws a square to Saturn and Pluto. When it hits Taurus, it throws a trine. When it gets to Cancer, it's opposite. When it gets to Virgo, it throws a trine. And then when it's in Libra, it's square again, coming back the other way. So for a little while here still, it's going to give us these monthly cycles of hitting these squares and trines. So if you didn't catch Saturn-Pluto around January 12th, we still have these incredible aspects where that energy is still very much alive. Now this sextile with Neptune and Venus, so if the moon is acting as a quick, boom, 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 boom trigger, then Neptune and Venus, even though Venus moves pretty quickly, this gives us time to work on some things. It gives us a little bit more soak, if you will. So if you are wanting to connect with that Saturn-Pluto transformational energy, this is a great time to open up that perception, I would think. Neptune in Pisces, it rules Pisces. Venus, exalted in Pisces. Venus sitting at 24 degrees Pisces, which is right in the middle of Saturn and Pluto. Now, the other thing that we have, yes, I remember, it is squared by Mars. And remember, as we've talked about, you can pull that square, I think, in one of two ways. So I would take that square and say, okay, I'm ready to roll up my sleeves, acknowledge the potential tension, right? And then say, Mars, would you come in and amplify this illumination or this enlightenment, but do it in a very benefic and gentle way. That would be a great way to play that. And that's going to be in place for a little while now, so we've got that one to work with. The sextile between Saturn, Pluto, and Neptune, Venus. Boy, talk about something that probably will not happen again for a long, 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 long time. We've got it right now. So get that journal out and take advantage of it. Have a good Monday. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.